Sometimes a movie tells you exactly what it is right on the title. The Secret Agent sounds like a spy thriller. You see that title and you immediately start imagining covert missions, coded messages, double agents, and someone outsmarting a dangerous government. But this movie does something much more interesting than that, because the twist of The Secret Agent is that there really isn't one.
What a twist!
One of the most interesting things about The Secret Agent is the way it slowly messes with the audience's expectations. From the title alone, you're waiting for the big reveal. You're watching Wagner Moura's character thinking, okay, when are we going to find out what his mission is? Is he working against the dictatorship? Is he undercover for the government? Is he secretly part of some resistance movement? And the movie keeps dangling that possibility in front of you for a long time. But eventually it becomes clear that this isn't a story about a spy at all. It's about something much more unsettling. An ordinary man trying to survive in a system where powerful people can decide to ruin your life, and there's almost nothing you can do about it. And with that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John. Just a quick heads up on format. I'll hit a handful of behind-the-scenes facts and the potent notables. Then I'll do a movie overview with spoilers, and I'll finish by ranking the movie across 10 categories. And today, I'll continue ranking the 2025 Best Picture nominees with The Secret Agent, starring Wagner Moura and written and directed by Kleber Mendonça Filho. Don't know if I said that right. I apologize if I didn't. The Secret Agent is nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Casting, Best International Feature, Best Actor for Wagner Moura, and of course, Best Picture. But let's find out how this stacks up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So as always, we start the potent notables with box office info. The Secret Agent made $4 million domestically and $13 million internationally for a worldwide total of $17 million. All against a budget of $5.1 million, or about 27 million Brazilian real. But in Brazil, the film performed especially well. With less than a month in theaters, it drew nearly 1 million viewers and became the highest grossing Brazilian release of 2025. So the movie is set in Recife, Brazil, and the film actually incorporates a well-known piece of local folklore, the urban legend of the hairy leg. So the story describes a supernatural creature in the form of a hairy white leg with large nails that attacks people with kicks and sweeps at night. I love that it sweeps. So the legend has several possible origins. Some believe it began as a fictional story created by journalists to explain mysterious acts of violence and sell newspapers, while others claim it was inspired by a real-life incident where a leg was found in a river. Over the years, the hairy leg became a full-blown urban myth, inspiring Cordell pamphlets, books, comics, a carnival song, and even the name of a street troupe. The film also includes a fun cinematic coincidence with Jaws. The movie by Steven Spielberg is referenced in this movie a lot. It also just happened to be re-released in Brazilian theaters for its 50th anniversary at the same time that The Secret Agent was playing. So in many theaters, trailers for Jaws were being shown right before screenings of The Secret Agent, creating an unexpected connection between the two films. Now, beyond the folklore and references, the film is deeply rooted in Brazil's political history. Photographs of then-President Ernesto Geisel appear throughout the film as a deliberate historical cue. During Brazil's military dictatorship, which lasted from 1964 to 1985, it was common and often mandatory for government offices and institutions to display the president's portrait. By showing Geisel's image repeatedly, the film emphasizes the pervasive presence of the authoritarian regime and the normalization of state control. And that historical context ties directly into one of the film's most disturbing moments. The scene involving the maid's daughter's death was inspired by a real case that occurred in Recife in 2020. A 5-year-old boy named Miguel Otavio Santana died after falling from the 9th floor of a building while under the supervision of his mother's employer. So much like in the film, the police station opened before its regular hours to take the employer's statement. And the director has said that the moment was meant to echo not just that specific case, but a broader pattern in Brazil where the justice system has sometimes bent to protect people with wealth and power. And finally, the film itself plays a kind of narrative trick on the audience. The title The Secret Agent leads viewers to believe that Wagner Moura's character might be some kind of undercover operative, but the movie slowly reveals a much more grounded truth. He's just an ordinary man caught in the violence and corruption of Brazil's military dictatorship. The title works on multiple levels, though. In 1977 Brazil, the phrase secret agent didn't just refer to glamorous spies from international films. It was also commonly used to describe unidentified operatives connected to the regime who carried out surveillance, intimidation, and clandestine actions. So there you go, those are all the potent notables. Let's go to the movie overview. So with The Secret Agent, we've got a movie that's playing a trick on the audience. From the title, most audiences would assume that we're dealing with some kind of operative. I'll admit that I kept waiting to find this out. Right from the beginning, we've got Marcelo, the main protagonist, who we'll find out later is actually named Armando. And so from here on out, I'm just gonna call him Armando. Anyway, he's driving up to a gas station, and there's a dead body lying on the ground. And in my mind, I'm immediately jumping to him knowing something about this dead body. And as the conversation between him and the gas station attendant continues, it becomes apparent that he doesn't. But then the cops show up. And when the cops show up, they're not here for the body. So what are they here for? They're here for Armando. Is he about to beat up some corrupt cops? Nope, they're just gonna shake down Armando for some money. And eventually just accept Armando's cigarettes as the bribery that they're looking for. Okay, so now we know, right? Armando's gonna be going against the corruption in Brazil. Now, I learned from last year's Brazilian nominee, I'm Still Here, about the military dictatorship that controlled Brazil from 1964 to 1985. But this takes place in 1977. So we're deeply entrenched in the middle of this dictatorship, whereas last year I'm Still Here was sort of at the beginning of the dictatorship. And that fact was what was confusing me at first, because I couldn't imagine a secret agent for that government being a protagonist in a Brazilian film. So he needed to be a secret agent from somewhere else, right? And the movie is not going to dispel that notion either. So after a title card that read Part 1, The Boy's Nightmare, the movie jumps to a crazy scene with another dead body. It's just that this time the dead body is a shark with an entire human leg in its belly. We're gonna meet more cops now, specifically the chief of police, Chief Euclides, and his two sons. It's pretty clear that they're dirty, but we don't know quite how yet. So we go back to Armando, and the movie brings us to Recife, which is where Armando is heading. He's clearly shaken by the dead body he's seen at the gas station, then shaken again by some weirdo in a crazy bear costume with a mask that just looks terrifying. He's gonna end up picking up an old lady and heading to an apartment complex. And you're like, okay, well, things are starting to seem like maybe he's not a secret agent. But then eventually the landlady hands him an envelope full of cash and says that he needs to meet somebody at 5 a.m. Okay, so something's up, right? I mean, she also makes like a, zipping her mouth closed motion, like the secret's safe with her or something. But then the movie jumps again, this time to a young boy who's drawing pictures of sharks. And mind you, this is after they displayed the title card that said The Boy's Nightmare. So for a little bit, I was thinking maybe we're seeing Armando as a boy. So I was like, okay, we're getting a flashback. But no, it turns out this is Fernando, Armando's son, and Armando has come to see him. However, the grandparents are like, should you really be here? So now I'm like, he's definitely an agent against the dictatorship or something. But then they don't discuss it. They just show him bonding with his son, making jokes about the leg that was found in the shark. They also give us some exposition about the kid's mom. She's definitely dead, and Armando intimates that she died of pneumonia. Though later on, it will feel like maybe that isn't what happened. We're not going to get any closure on that, though. And just like that, the movie jumps again. Now we're seeing two men, one older, one younger, who are dumping a body into some water. And the younger guy seems to be really interested in what was going on, why she was killed. And then the only explanation that the older guy eventually gives him is inheritance and envy. And this is how we meet the hitmen of the movie. We're going to follow them as they have a meeting with Garotti, who's just some generic rich prick who claims that Armando is a terrible person, and then hires these guys to kill him. Now, maybe I'm crazy here, but if you're hiring hitmen, you're probably not the good person in the scenario. There may be exceptions to that, but they seem unlikely. And just like that, the movie jumps again. Now we're seeing these two college-aged women listening to tapes that say Marcelo on them. I was so confused. Were we skipping forward in time? What was going on? But just as soon as they were there, they were gone and replaced by a new title card, Part 2, Identification Institutes. This section is where we're gonna find out what Armando's clandestine 5 a.m. meeting was all about. And it was about him being on time for his new job. What was his new job? Working in the archives of the Identifications Institute. Of course, his first day didn't go as planned because Euclides, the chief of police, who we just discovered definitely killed some guy whose leg ended up being in the shark, is using that building to take a deposition as like a makeshift police station. And what the deposition is for is both sad and not really important to the story. The point of this whole thing is for Euclides to meet Armando, who he would know as Marcelo, and immediately take a shine to him. I don't really understand why he likes him so much, and it's never really expressed, but whatever, I guess. But he's gonna take Armando to meet Hans, and I don't really understand the point of this story. Now, I get what the filmmaker is expressing here. about how extreme people tend to not be able to see past their own ideology and notice that Hans wasn't a soldier, but a Holocaust surviving Jew. However, I'm not sure what this serves as far as story is concerned, other than just showing Euclides as like a racist, non-observant person. But the movie's going to continue to lean into the secret agent bit. Once Armando is able to get away from Euclides, he makes a call to Joao, whoever that is. And Joao's going to be like, it's not a safe number for you to call me on. The phones are tapped. And then Armando needs to send Joao a number for Joao to call him. And I mean, even though Armando reacts by saying, how? It still feels like he's some kind of secret badass working on some secret mission. Though I will say the mystery surrounding him is starting to wear a little thin. So Armando's going to end up sending Joao a telegram, and he uses the theater that his father-in-law, Alexander, works at as the phone number to call. Now, while he's waiting for this call, Alexander is going to ask Armando if he fucked around on his wife, which obviously was his daughter. This felt like a little bit of a non sequitur, but there's a lot of sexual imagery in this movie that felt either unexpected or unnecessary. But Armando is saved by the phone as Joao calls him before he has to answer the question. And it turns out that Armando's name was put on a list, which means he can't leave the country. And the most important person in the story is now Elsa. Who's Elsa? Well, we're gonna meet her next. She's gonna conduct an interview with Armando and record it. And this really felt odd if he was a secret agent. And we're gonna find out in this interview that the twist is that he's not a secret agent. He just pissed off the wrong rich guy. We also find out that the reason he's working in the Identification Institute is because he wants to find proof of his mother's existence. So he requested that job assignment. So we're gonna find out through Armando's story. Unsurprisingly, Garotti is as big of a piece of shit as he looks like he is. He's super rude to Armando and Armando's wife. So what this all boils down to is that at some point, Armando punched Garotti's son in the face because he was being a giant douchebag, and then Garotti, to get back at him, destroyed his career and put a hit out on him. Seems like a swell guy. Also, Armando says that he's not a violent person during this interview, but that he would kill Garotti with a hammer. So that effectively says a lot. We also understand now what the people in the future are listening to as we cut back and forth. So we're going to cut back over to the hitman, and naturally Euclides knows the older hitman guy. They go way back. But right after we see them take a joyride together, the movie suddenly turns into a surreal B-movie, like out of nowhere. It's following the hairy leg, which, I thought was the leg from the shark earlier. And it's just, hopping around and kicking victims who are all basically fornicating. And I was really wondering what the hell was going on when this started happening. Like, did we just change to a completely different movie? But they let us know that these are images created from reading a newspaper article. And while this was fun and alludes to something from Brazil's past, it's another instance of having a story in the movie that really doesn't move the plot forward at all and is unnecessary. And in a movie that's almost 3 hours long, this is the stuff that you need to cut. But we're gonna go on to part 3, blood transfusion. So the hitmen are gonna recruit another guy to be a hitman for them, but they're gonna pay the other projectionist to get information on Alexander so that they can find Armando. So the new hitman, Vilmar or something like that, follows the grandpa, and I was really worried that they were gonna kill him. And I was also really worried about Fernando, that he was gonna get caught in the crossfire or something. But this is what the whole movie has been building to. Armando is gonna realize that Vilmar, who calls out to him in the Identification Institute as Armando, is there to kill him. So Armando is going to go to Euclides and convince him to send somebody out to help him without giving himself away. Then Vilmar ends up killing both the cops that went with him, one of which was Euclides' son, and then Armando sort of goes away and calls Elsa and is like, all right, look, I need the passports now because we're all done in Recife. Meanwhile, Vilmar is going to kill the younger hitman as well. So a lot of carnage from Vilmar here, and he kills 3 people except for the guy he was supposed to kill. But then we're going to jump forward to the women that were listening to the tapes. One of them, Flavia, is going to want to get some closure on what happened to Armando. So she's going to scour the newspapers, and we figure out what happened through a newspaper headline. He was killed. It feels like an anticlimax, but that's the point. It's meant to feel like he's just suddenly gone, just when we thought he was going to get out. But the reality is that during that regime in Brazil, people just disappeared and there was rarely any closure or catharsis for their loved ones. They were just gone, and that is replicated in this scene. But the filmmaker is going to take it one step further. When he has Flavia meet up with Fernando, who's now an adult and a doctor. He was raised by his grandfather, whom he considers his father, and he doesn't appear mad at his dad, but he points out that she, Flavia, remembers him now better than he does. It's a gut-wrenching scene, and the director wants to make sure that we see the everyday way in which this interaction takes place. It's common, it's expected. It's the life that the people of that generation knew. And with that, the movie ends. Let's see how it ranked.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the movie based on 10 categories: story, acting, originality, film coherence, cinematography, score/soundtrack/sound, script structure and dialogue, character relatability, production value, and my rank. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. It's essentially the story of an ordinary man who's been targeted by a corrupt regime. More specifically, by a corrupt person within a corrupt regime. We follow him from the moment his quasi-refugee status starts, through his attempt to get out of the country with his son, to his ultimate anticlimactic death. It's a great story that maybe was a little bit more drawn out than it needed to be. I gave it an 8.75. So we go to acting, and Wagner Moura is very good. Also, is it just me, or does he look a lot like Pedro Pascal? Anyway, I thought everyone was good in this, though some were playing it a little broad, especially Euclides and his sons. Not in a terrible way, but in an almost too evil way. Wagner is obviously the standout though, as evidenced by his nomination. I gave it an 8. So that brings us to originality. There's definitely an originality to this movie. The twist of The Secret Agent is that there isn't a secret agent. Its originality is actually in its banality. It's surprisingly mundane and yet tense and exciting. So I gave it an 8.5. So that brings us to film coherence. The main hit on this is that it's just too long. And I get that the director wanted to create a lot of metaphorical references to Brazilian culture and Brazilian history, like what I mentioned in the Potent Notables about secret agents, or the hairy leg thing. Unnecessary. I also feel like the anticlimactic ending, while powerful in its meaning, also left the audience wondering how it happened. Was it the older hitman that did it? I mean, one can only assume, I suppose. What happened with Garati? Nothing? Not even after the regime fell? And the cloudiness of it is the point. But it's also a little bit of a detriment in my opinion. Also, and I know this is really nitpicky, but they were screening The Shining in this. And it really threw me off because I was like, isn't this supposed to be 1977? And I knew The Shining didn't come out until 1980. So unless Brazil got it 3 years before everybody else in the world, it feels like a really careless error. But really, the big thing, once again, is just that it's about 40 minutes longer than it needs to be. I gave it a 6.75. So that moves us on to cinematography. The cinematography is definitely interesting, but sometimes it was distracting. It was as if they were trying to show off how artistic they were. I don't want to knock it too much for this, but it just felt like sometimes they were just trying too hard. I gave it a 7.5. So that brings us to score/soundtrack/sound, and they mixed in a lot of songs from the 70s. It was playful and fun. It didn't really stick out to me though, but it also didn't distract me, which is actually a really big positive in my opinion. So I gave it an 8. So that brings us to script structure and dialogue. Some of the dialogue felt jilted. One example is actually right from the beginning, where the gas station attendant tells Marcelo/Armando that it's Tuesday. Now I would think Armando would know that, and I get it's for the exposition, but it's the one that jumps out to me. But there are other examples of where they were just saying things that felt like maybe wouldn't actually be said. These are just small knocks on it though. I gave it an 8.25. So that brings us to character relatability. It's hard to really gain much empathy for a while because you're spending so much time trying to figure out what's going on. But by the time Armando tells the story about Garati, you can definitely empathize with him. Everyone else in the movie though feels a little two-dimensional. Like every one of the villains is just, it's so fun to be bad. It just felt like if you're gonna give me almost 3 hours, make me get a better understanding of everyone's motivation. And I'm not saying that there were never people like that, but it just felt like they could have given me more. I gave it a 6.5. So that moves us on to production value. Now, I definitely felt like I was never on a set. It all felt real to me, but I also don't have much of a frame of reference for 1970s Brazil. The leg and the shark and the kill shot of Euclides' son felt gruesome in a way that didn't really feel real to a certain extent, but those aren't big issues. I gave it an 8.5. So that brings us to my rank. So this movie definitely made me think, which is always positive. It's really very tragic and it leaves you feeling frustrated. And I love the intentionalness of making the viewer feel frustrated, to mirror how people felt during that regime. Between this and I'm Still Here, it really feels like Brazil is reckoning with that time in their history. All that being said, I wish they hadn't put so much ancillary stuff in here. I think it could have been just as thoughtful without it. So I gave it a 7.75. So altogether, that puts The Secret Agent at a 78.5, which makes it an I'd watch it again. And since this is the final movie of the 2025 nominees that I've ranked, I can now say that it ranked 8th of the 10 movies that are nominated this year, sitting between Hamnet at number 7 and F1 at number 9. As far as all time, it falls below Life is Beautiful and a point above Ray. Also, this means that according to the rank, Train Dreams is the best nominee of the year and should win Best Picture, though I doubt it will. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your score in the comments. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Best Picture ranking episodes or any of my other movie or sitcom ranking episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment. For up-to-date rankings, you can check out my website at therankedpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankedpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankedpodcast. But that's it. Case closed. The title of The Secret Agent leads viewers to think. Cut! The title of The Secret Agent leads people to. Cut! The title of The Secret Agent leads viewers to.
Well, we're waiting.